is Thursday, October 3rd. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's headlines. A delegation from the World Bank is in Lebanon in order to address the International Support Group meeting that was held on the margins of the United Nations General Assembly. 6 Syrian rebel groups call on two major rival rebel factions battling each other in the north to end the infighting, while Human Rights Watch accuses the Syrian regime of detaining tens of thousands of people. And swarms of aggressive hornets in their fall mating season are inflicting a deadly toll in China. 42 people are dead and over 1,500 injured. The head of the Higher Relief Committee, Brahim Bashir, vowed to the delegation he led to Indonesia would return with the survivors of the Indonesian boat tragedy early next week, as news emerged that Australia had made special efforts to warn officials in northern Lebanon. We have secured tickets to the 18 Lebanese so that they return with us aboard the same plane early next week, Bashir said at the Rafiq Hariri International Airport prior to his departure. He also said that the delegation would make efforts to bring back home with it 6 Lebanese arrested in Indonesia for overstaying their visa. Bashir said that the bodies would be repatriated as soon as possible once DNA tests were over. He did not mention the Lebanese who were reportedly waiting in Indonesia to attempt a similar trip. Meanwhile, authorities have officially called off the search and rescue operation prompted last week when the asylum seeker boat sank after attempting to reach Australia, leaving more than 50 people dead or missing. A delegation from the World Bank is in Lebanon in order to address the International Support Group meeting that was held on the margins of the United Nations General Assembly last week. Vice President of the Middle East and North Africa at the World Bank, Inger Anderson, and the accompanying delegation are scheduled to hold talks with President Michel Sleiman, Prime Minister-designate Tamam Salam, and a number of ministers on ways in which to follow up on last week's meeting. The visit is aimed at discussing with officials the mechanisms to adopt in order to coordinate the follow-up efforts with the international group in light of Lebanon's failure to form a new government. The IS group on Lebanon said last week that the country is facing an explosion of social tensions, and unless the international community helps to handle the hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees, things are bound to get worse. An attempt to smuggle explosive material through sandwiches was thwarted at Rumi prison. It said that 150 grams of explosive material were discovered in a sandwich that was being delivered to an inmate called Sharb al-Shalita, who is the murderer of Roland Speer. The National News Agency later reported that a member of prison security was delivering the sandwich to the prisoner. The explosives were discovered on the security guard during a routine security check as he was entering the prison to start his shift. He confessed that Shalita had requested that he obtain explosive that can be used to heat water. The NNA added, however, that the material with certain modifications can be turned into an explosive substance. According to the prisoners, this was not the first time that explosive material was smuggled into the prison and to its B block, in particular where Fatah al-Islam inmates are being detained. President Michel Sleiman is urging the Future Movement-led March 14 coalition not to tie national dialogue to Hezbollah's military involvement in Syria. It's wrong for some to say that we will only sit down with Hezbollah after its return from Syria, because Hezbollah is essentially a component of the Lebanese fabric, Sleiman said in remarks published by the local daily As-Safir. Sleiman was quoted as saying, "It is true that we are against Hezbollah's involvement in Syria, but we sit down, should Hezbollah, with and tell them that you must come back from Syria." He stressed that the Babda Declaration, which calls for keeping Lebanon at distance from the Syrian crisis, provides benefits for all because it calls for keeping Lebanon neutral from conflicts. Six Syrian rebel groups are calling on two major rival rebel factions battling each other in the north to end the infighting. The six released a statement urging the rival faction to cease the fire immediately and resolve their differences before an Islamic court. The two major factions battling in the north are Al-Qaeda's Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant on one side, and then the Western-backed Free Syrian Army's Northern Storm Brigade on the other. The statement was reported by the Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which documents the civil war and also rebel-on-rebel fighting. Meanwhile, 9 disarmament experts tasked with implementing a UN resolution ordering the destruction of Syria's chemical arsenal left their hotel and headed for an unknown location. 2 days after arriving in Damascus, the experts from the Hague-based Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons drove off in 3 UN vehicles. Human Rights Watch is accusing the Syrian regime of detaining tens of thousands of people for protesting peacefully, torturing many, or holding them for long periods. Behind the awful brutality of the fighting in Syria is the unseen abuse of political detainees, arrested, tortured, and even killed for peacefully criticizing the government or helping people in need, according to Joe Stork, the Middle East and North Africa head for the New York-based watchdog. Former detainees told HRW that methods such as electric shocks, rape, and beatings were regularly used against political prisoners in Syria. HRW said that this widespread use of torture in regime prisons was evidence of a clear government policy that could constitute crimes against humanity, urging Damascus to drop charges against activists facing trial in special courts. While most of those taken into custody by security forces have been men, HRW said that women and children have also been arrested. Coming up next, a charter plane crashes in Lagos, Nigeria, killing at least 8 people. We'll be right back. Welcome back. In back-to-back speeches to the UN General Assembly, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani of seeking to obtain a nuclear weapon, and the Iranian representative insisted that Tehran's nuclear program was intended solely for peaceful purposes. Rouhani, whose demeanor has been more moderate than that of his predecessor since he took office in August, according to Netanyahu, is a wolf in sheep's clothing, a wolf who thinks he can pull the wool over the eyes of the international community. Western leaders have expressed optimism about Iran's more moderate tone under Rouhani, whose recent comments have raised hopes that a deal could be struck over the Middle Eastern nation's nuclear program. But Netanyahu urged world leaders not to be duped by Rouhani, calling him a loyal servant to the Islamic regime, which he said executes political dissidents by the hundreds and jails them by the thousands. A suicide bomber rammed a car packed with explosives into the compound of a rival militant commander in northwest Pakistan, killing 15 people, according to a government official. The commander, Nabi Hanfi, was not present at the time of the attack, but according to a local government administrator, Hanfi has been battling the Pakistani Taliban in the Orakzai tribal area where the bombing occurred. He said gunmen first fired shots at Hanfi's compound in Balandagal village, and then the suicide bomber detonated his vehicle. No one has claimed responsibility, but suspicion will likely fall on the Pakistani Taliban. A local tribal leader, Malik Nek Marjan, said the Pakistani government has been supported by Hanfi's group in its battle against the Taliban. Yemeni forces announced they had retaken control of an army headquarters in the southeast, killing the al-Qaeda gunman holed up there and freeing troops who had been held hostage. The armed forces have successfully completed the assault on the headquarters of the second military region at Mukalla and have thoroughly cleansed it of terrorist elements, a defense ministry source was quoted as saying by the official Saba news agency. The statement added that all terrorists who were in the building were annihilated. Mukalla is the capital of the southeastern province of Hadramaut and is a major port city. Gunmen from the al-Qaeda-affiliated Ansar al-Sharia group seized the army headquarters on Monday after a suicide bomber rammed his car into the entrance and took an unknown number of hostages. And in Libya, dozens of angry protesters tried to storm Russia's embassy in Tripoli after reports that a Russian woman had killed a Libyan army officer. The demonstrators destroyed a car parked in front of the embassy compound and damaged the mission's entrance gate. Security services arrived on the scene to protect the diplomats inside the compound. They were eventually able to disperse the protesters, evacuate Russian diplomatic staff, and were guarding the embassy, according to witnesses that added that no one appeared to have been injured in the unrest. Later, Prime Minister Ali Zaidan and Foreign Minister Mohammed Abdulaziz went to the Russian embassy to survey the damage caused. The incident comes 2 days after conflicting reports emerged about the circumstances surrounding the murder of an army officer in the Souq Jum'a district of Tripoli. At least 80 migrants have drowned, and rescuers are trying to save about 250 people still missing near the Italian island of Lampedusa after a migrant boat caught fire and sank. According to Italian media reports, rescuers recovered at least 25 bodies from the waters. A spokesman of the Italian Coast Guard said that the Italian official described that many of these people had been in the water since the early hours of the morning and that it was a race against time to rescue as many people as possible. It appears that there was a malfunction on board and the migrants are believed to have created a small fire to attract the attention of the Coast Guard. More than 160 people have been plucked from the water alive in the search involving Coast Guard and custom boats and helicopters. Swarms of aggressive hornets in their full mating season are inflicting a deadly toll in a central Chinese province. Hornets have killed 42 people so far and injured over 1,600 in 3 cities in Shaanxi province since July. According to the local government, 37 patients remain in critical or serious condition. Over the summer and early fall, hornets have invaded schools full of children and descended upon unsuspecting farm workers in China. The influx of venom to the human body can cause allergic reactions and multiple organ failure, leading to death. Government authorities say these attacks are from a particularly venomous species, the world's largest hornet, known as the Asian giant hornet, or Vespa mandarina. The giant hornet extends about 3.5 to 3.9 centimeters in length, roughly the size of a human thumb. It has an orange head with a black tooth used for burrowing, according to an animal database at the University of Michigan. A charter plane crashed in Lagos, Nigeria, killing at least 8 people, the country's emergency management said in a post on Twitter. One survivor was found at the site, but the agency had previously reported that 11 had died in the mishap and 4 were taken to a hospital. The Associated Airlines plane, as it's called, was carrying 20 passengers when it took off from Murtala Muhammad International Airport. The aircraft crashed during takeoff, according to the Nigerian Airspace Management Agency. From Chinese bloggers to European central bankers, the world is watching the U.S. government shutdown with a mixture of bewilderment and growing nervousness that any debt default could hit struggling economies. The effects of the dramatic spending freeze have rippled around the globe, paralyzing a leading earthquake alert system, forcing American scientists to pull out of international conferences, and leading an embarrassed President Barack Obama to postpone visits to 2 Asian countries. An emerging superpower, China, a one-party state where legislative deadlock holds little for fear of the communist rulers. The official Xinhua news agency said the situation had once again brought to the forefront the ugly side of partisan politics in Washington. Apart from reaching a budget deal to end the shutdown, Congress must agree within 2 weeks to raise the $16.7 trillion US debt ceiling or risk a default on government debt. Finally, a Los Angeles jury decided AEG Live hired Dr. Conrad Murray, but also concluded that the concert promoter was not liable for Michael Jackson's drug overdose death. The jury decided that Murray, who was his doctor at the time, was competent. So even though AEG Live hired him, it was not liable for Jackson's death and did not owe the Jackson family millions of dollars in compensation. I counted Michael Jackson a creative partner and a friend, the company's CEO, Randy Phillips, said. We lost one of the world's greatest musical geniuses, but I'm relieved and deeply grateful that the jury recognized that neither I nor anyone else at AEG Live played any part in Michael's tragic death. The jury accepted AEG Live lawyers' arguments that the company was not negligent because its executives had no way of knowing that Murray, licensed to practice in 4 states and never sued for malpractice, was a risk to Jackson. The singer was a secretive drug addict who even kept his closest relatives in the dark about his use of propofol to sleep. On that note, we end our bulletin for today. Here's a reminder of our top stories. A delegation from the World Bank is in Lebanon in order to address the International Support Group meeting that was held on the margins of the United Nations General Assembly. 6 Syrian rebels groups call on 2 major rival rebel factions battling each other in the north to end the infighting, while Human Rights Watch accuses the Syrian regime of detaining tens of thousands of people. And swarms of aggressive hornets in their fall mating season are inflicting a deadly toll in China. 42 people are dead so far and over 1,500 injured. Those are your Thursday headlines live on Future Television. Noor Ael is next with the French Bulletin. I'll see you again tomorrow.